Welcome back to the Relationships Made Simple for Men podcast with me, Bryce Bauer. Today is June 26th, 2025, and it is getting hot here in St. George, Utah. Jenny and I moved down here from Salt Lake City about 4 years ago because we love warmth and sunshine, and we get a lot of that here. Today, I'm going to be telling you the story of my own relational recovery. And what I mean when I say relational recovery is that I went from a place of not feeling connected to myself and the people in my life to a place where I have a secure relationship with myself and my wife and my parents and a lot of my friends. Obviously, not everything is perfect. This is a journey, not a destination. But to go from feeling numb and suicidal and having no one in my life trust me to being a man who feels like he can express himself in the world and be a good partner and a good son and a good friend, that has been a big deal for me. So I'm going to jump around here and I have no idea how long this is going to take, but I'll just start from the beginning. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, March 28th, 1989. Both of my parents were there. I was their first child. And as far as I know, things were pretty normal. Both of my parents were in their late 20s. My dad worked construction for his family-owned business with his dad and brothers, and my mom worked like part-time as an assistant to the company, as well as taking care of me. 2 years later, my sister was born, and she's the only biological sibling that I have. Now, my family doesn't have a lot of documentation of my earlier years. Back then, they just had the old school video recorders, so there's not much there. But I do know that I was an extremely quiet and sensitive boy. One of my first memories, I was probably 5 years old. We went to a stocked fishing pond and I ended up catching a fish. And the guy that was helping us out got the fish and immediately threw it up on this block of wood, grabbed it by the tail, and just beat the shit out of it with a wooden stick in the head until it died. And I was mortified. I did not know that that was going to happen. And then they put the cooler with the dead fish in it right next to me as we rode home. And I remember opening it up and looking at this dead fish and just feeling so sad and confused as to what had happened. I think I just felt a lot of empathy towards other people and animals. But back then, I don't think my parents really knew how to make sense of my personality and how I was. So they would just say things like, yeah, Bryce doesn't talk a lot. I was good doing self-play. So he just kind of does his own thing. And I have a feeling that that is why I can be more avoidantly attached and I can feel better by myself to resource when there is conflict versus wanting to lean in and talk about things. I've had to work on that. But the point I'm trying to make is that later on in my life, when emotions got more intense and life got really crazy, I kind of collapsed into myself and shut down because I didn't trust that other people would understand me or be able to hold space for my emotions. So although I was shy and introverted, my dad also really pushed me into sports. And thankfully, I really got into sports. I didn't always want to go to practice, and I would get scared at games or events, but I genuinely liked it. And it was a way to deal with my anxiety. Like when I was in motion, when I was exercising, pushing myself, the anxiety that I felt calmed down. And it got me out of my shell, got me to be around other kids, taught me discipline, how to work hard, how to be a team player. So all in all, I think it was good for me. However, because the sports that my dad wanted me to do were really tough sports, football, wrestling, and karate, I had to find a way to strategize and mask physical pain and anxiety because you really can't show weakness in these sports. So if I got punched in the nose or tackled really hard or thrown down, I had to pretend like everything was okay because no one was going to come over and be like, "Oh, are you all right, Bryce? Where does it hurt? How did it feel to get hit or tackled like that?" Or my dad would say things like, well, you said you'd be there. So if I didn't want to go to practice and I was feeling anxiety and I was feeling like I didn't want to be there, he would always remind me that you said you'd be there. You're on a team. You need to show up and play. And this can be a good lesson for kids. I'm not saying it's not helpful to be challenged in that way. But the point is that a lot of my emotions got missed by everybody. And I became really good at masking how I was feeling in order to fit in with the team, to please dad, and to not look weak to the other boys. And I was a smaller kid. Luckily, I did not get picked on much because I was genuinely pretty tough and good at sports. But there was one situation that happened in fifth grade that is very informative as to how I learned how to deal with conflict, especially into my teenage years. I'll never forget this. So, in fifth grade, I was in elementary, and we would always play tackle football at recess. And there was a couple of ladies out there, teachers, I think, that would sometimes see us doing this and take the football, say, you guys can't do that. But we just keep doing it anyway. So we played a lot of tackle football at recess, and I liked it. I always struggled to sit still in school and just learn. I was a really smart kid, so I'd get done with assignments early and just sit there bored. And it was agonizing. So I loved being able to get outside and just move that energy. But, anyways, there was this big kid, I think his name was Andy, and he had a habit of just blindsiding kids and knocking them down for no reason. He was just a bully. And for some reason, one week, I caught his attention and he did it to me. Came out of nowhere, ran into me, knocked me down, and I was confused. I didn't even have the ball, and I probably felt scared of him too, but I tried to pretend like nothing happened. Well, anyways, next day he does it again, next day he does it again. And now I'm starting to feel nervous going out to recess because I'm just looking for him. So I don't know how this conversation started, but I ended up telling my dad, or maybe he asked me something, and I'll never forget what he said. And this is almost verbatim. He said, well, Bryce, if you do fight back, you will not be in trouble with me. And the way that I translated that was that I have to fight him in order to get him to stop. That is the solution. And of course, this is against my nature. I've never been in a fight. I mean, I had competed in karate matches and a lot of wrestling matches. So I was used to the physicality, but it was always in a context that was fairly safe. The adults are around, nothing can get too out of hand, and I'm not intentionally trying to hurt someone else. This was different. In this situation, I was being given a message that I needed to hurt this kid back. So the next day, I walked onto the playground and I was ready to go to battle. I was extremely scared and anxious, probably still a bit confused, but I knew what I had to do. So sure enough, I'm not looking, and Andy comes up from behind me and knocks me to the ground. And I get up, I square up with him, I ball up my fist and swing as hard as I possibly can right at his face. And I think what happened is that at the last second, I pulled back just a little bit because I didn't want to actually hit him, but my fist came within a half an inch of his nose, and his eyes got real big. I could tell he was scared and surprised. We locked eyes and shared this moment of confusion and fear, just being little boys, neither of us understanding what had just happened. And then he just turned and walked away. And as I stood there, just like shaking, I began to feel this relief come over me. I did the scary thing. I did what my dad told me to do. I sent a message, and Andy never fucked with me again. I saw him bully other kids still, but not me. And in a lot of ways, I think this boosted my confidence. And this will kind of foreshadow what's to come. So my dad ended up getting a job in Bentonville, Arkansas in the year 2000. So we moved down there as a family when I was 11. And although I know a lot of kids move around, for me, this was a traumatic experience, and it lasted for months. My dog, who I'd had since I was a little kid, ran away 2 weeks before we moved, never came back. I left the few close friends that I had. I had to miss that wrestling season, and my dad ended up working a lot when we got down to Arkansas. He also started drinking again, which had been a problem for him. He had actually gone to drug and alcohol treatment when I was like 2 years old and had been sober up until we moved to Arkansas. So I think that also contributed to his lack of emotional availability in the home and with me. I think my mom was probably depressed. I mean, she moved too and didn't know anybody. She was kind of shy like me. I think my sister was struggling some too, but either way, it was just a depressing environment. And I know my parents did things to try to help, but over the course of a few months, I slowly collapsed into myself, felt completely alone. And right around my 12th birthday, which is really young, I started fantasizing about ending my own life. I didn't really have the means to do it, but I just knew that I didn't want to keep experiencing what was happening in my life. And I didn't know how to talk about it. And I wasn't getting any professional support. My parents probably knew I was sad, but they didn't know the degree to which I was feeling depressed. And I just became a ticking time bomb. So by the fall, football season started. I got on a team. I had made a few friends and things were looking a little bit more up. But I started finding myself gravitating towards the troublemakers in school. They seem more fun, more interesting. And I think on a deeper level, I could just relate with them because they were experiencing pain in their home and I could relate with that. And as I watched them act out in school, get in trouble, talk back to teachers, not do their homework, I started to realize that I could earn points with them if I did the same. And although this was against my nature in a lot of ways, that need to be accepted and to be seen and to be important within the group overrode my natural tendencies. And so within a short period of time, I turned into one of those kids. I didn't care about my grades. I started rebelling against teachers and my parents, sneaking out at night. At first, not too late, but then it got later and later. And by 14, I was doing some really dangerous stuff. Some of my friends were taking their parents' cars. I was taking my parents' cars. We were drinking alcohol, smoking weed, sometimes almost daily, abusing my friends, Ritalin and Adderall during the day or staying up through the night. I mean, shit was crazy. One of my friends got a DUI at my house when he was 13. He took his mom's car, drove to my house. I was having like a little mini party while my parents were asleep in the garage attic. He got really drunk. Somehow my parents woke up. And then he tried to leave while my parents were there. My parents told him not to. He did anyways, was trying to leave. They called the cops because they couldn't stop him. And I watched him get arrested in my driveway. Supposedly, it was the youngest DUI in the county ever. 13 years old. It's hard to believe when I see kids that age now that I was doing some of this stuff. There are so many stories I can tell, but high level, I was in a lot of trouble. I got a DUI when I was 16, taken to jail, had to go through the court system and probation, also arrested for possession another time. A lot of close calls where cops let us go because they didn't find what we had, or we were on other drugs that they couldn't test for, like ecstasy. Still picked up a possession charge when I was 16, got expelled from high school when I was 16. My parents did offer for me to go to therapy at that point, and I met with this older woman maybe 5 or 6 times and told her, 75% of the truth. And it was kind of helpful. Tried homeschooling, tried switching schools, eventually kind of getting it together and coming back to my original school to graduate and having to jump through tons of hoops like homeschooling and night schooling and weekend schooling just to get enough credits. The whole time I'm having all kinds of conflict with my parents, mostly my dad, because he was the one that was trying to talk sense into me and discipline me, but nothing really worked. I mean, what can you do when you say you're grounded and then I get caught sneaking out again? And then you say, well, now you're grounded longer, but then I do it again. I was just out of control. And really looking back, I think there were a couple things going on. Obviously, a mental health crisis that was never dealt with, and it manifested as risky behaviors and addiction. I really do think that my brain got wired for addiction at an early age, and I don't think that will ever not be the case. That's why I choose to be sober today. And I think that I was just in an environment, being at a big school for a lot of my high school years, where I just got missed and flew under the radar. And I was able to hide who I was with and what I was doing from my parents as I got older. They did not really understand that one of my best friends' mom was a meth addict, and that every time we went to his house, She either wasn't there or was totally okay with us doing whatever we wanted to do in this house. It was just a free for all. And I never got hooked on anything too intense. I mean, I tried almost every drug I was aware of at that time, at least once, or a version of it, a synthetic version, but it was just crazy. And coupled with that was a toxic relationship through high school. And I still feel bad to this day thinking about how I treated her because she had a lot of issues too. But all that to say, if you could encapsulate all of a parent's worst fears about what their child could do in high school, I pretty much did all of them except for dying. And even that was close a few times. And so here was a young boy or young man, me, who had no idea how to take care of himself, his own emotional state, or how to create meaningful, fulfilling, secure, honest relationships with anybody in his life. This was the rock bottom. And so, long story short, I ended up getting into a bad car accident while on Xanax, and my parents set up an intervention with that therapist lady that I had been meeting with. And off I went to a 60-day wilderness therapy program in Asheville, North Carolina. I was 18 years old. This is in 2007. And this program was pretty intense. I mean, it's not like they were yelling and screaming at us like a boot camp, but spending weeks in the Appalachian Mountains, not knowing where you are, hiking long miles in the rain, the heat, the cold, with pretty basic gear and basic food, it was much different than I was used to. I realized pretty quickly that my life in Arkansas was a lot more comfortable than this. And I struggled. I was one of the most challenging clients at the program while I was there. I shut down a lot. I didn't want to do the assignments. I didn't want to learn the wilderness skills. I just wanted to get the fuck out of there. And we did at least a couple groups per day, led by the guides or the therapists. I had weekly therapy sessions. My therapist was pretty cool, but I was just not having it. Nothing was getting through to me. It's not like I really had a plan as to what I would do if I left. I was just in some survival mode of either fighting or shutting down. At one point, I even said, I'm just going to leave. And they were like, well, you can't take any of your gear with you. We're in the middle of the woods. I don't know where I am. And they say, there's a dirt road 8 miles from here. Good luck. They called my bluff, and I realized that that probably wasn't a good idea. It scared me, to be quite honest, to think about just leaving, trying to find a dirt road, to find a paved road, and then to hitchhike back to Arkansas with nothing. Yeah, that was scary for me at 18. So I did not choose that. But it did open me up some. I began to cry more after this. I think accepting my reality that my choices had really led me here was confronting. It really all came to a head at the end of the program, where each client could do an optional 4-night, 5-day vision quest, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a Native American tradition that they were trying to incorporate. And basically, we drove out really deep into the mountains. They blindfolded us and led us maybe a half mile into the woods, all separately, to a spot that we would stay at by ourselves for the entirety of the experience. All we had was a tarp, a sleeping bag, and a bag of dried food. No fires, no headlamp, and a journal and a pen. That's it. Day one was fine. I liked not having the supervision and being told what to do. Day two, I completely fell apart, cried for a good portion of the day, thought about blowing the whistle, which was like our only way to get out of the experience. The guides were close enough that they would, I guess, hear it and come find us if we were in trouble or wanted to quit. But since I hadn't heard any other whistles in the woods, I was not too far away from some of the other clients. I never saw them, but I knew they were pretty close. I just didn't want to be the first one to blow the whistle if anyone was going to. So I stuck it out. I mean, even thinking about it to this day, this would be extremely challenging for me, or probably anybody, to spend this much time alone. I mean, you naturally start talking to yourself, getting a little bit loopy, going through anxious patterns, pacing. At one point, I was just wanting to get rid of the feelings, so I tried to eat a bunch of granola and peanut butter, and I got sick. I mean, just this roller coaster. And occasional moments of peace, like real, clear, grounded, silent peace. But what I took away from that experience was that I had to take responsibility for my life. And nothing made it more clear than being completely alone and realizing just how much pain I was in, how crazy my mind was, how guilty I felt, how regretful I felt, how sad I felt. All of that came rushing in without the distractions. And it was weird. After that point, something just woke up in me and I wanted to be sober. I wanted to make a good life for myself. I wanted to try to work things out with my parents. And ironically, I even wanted to become a wilderness guide. Even though I hated the experience as a client, I wanted to come back and work at this program because their lives looked pretty sick. They worked a week or two on and a week or two off. So they're like camping for their work and then they can just do whatever they want in their free time. That sounded awesome. I wanted to be that feral, that free, and to help people in the process. So I'll kind of fast forward a bit. I was only 18 at the time, and you can't work for these programs until you're 21. So I basically realized that I had to bide my time, stay sober, get a job, make some money for the next 2.5 years before I could even apply to work for one of these programs. So that's what I did. I worked at a restaurant. I got my wilderness first responder certification. I completed a coaching program. I tried to move to San Francisco at one point, only lasted a couple months, but it was still good for me. And at 21, I called that program up. It was called Four Circles in Asheville, North Carolina. And I said, I want to work there. I went through as a client. I've stayed sober. I have these certifications. I'm ready to go. And they said, we are not hiring right now. And I was like, shit, what do I do? It's probably also worth mentioning that I had picked up a assault and battery charge at 18, and I had been dealing with that all the way up until my 21st birthday. And this will kind of come into play later. Where Circles ends up referring me to another program in the middle of nowhere, Utah, a town of like 200 people. They end up telling me, hey, we have an interview coming up next month, and you're welcome to come out and interview. It turns out this was a week-long interview where you'd go out into the field, out into the high desert, and basically show the field director what you're made of. And even though I was scared, I mean, terrified, really, I showed up. I think there were 8 other people applying for the job. A lot of them were in their late 20s and 30s and even 40s. And I'm this like 21-year-old kid. So I felt so out of place, but I did okay. I pretended to know some things that I didn't know. And I had some experience from being a client in the therapy program. But we get to the end of the interview, and if you don't get the job, you get no stipend, no job. See you later. Goodbye. Thanks for coming. So they call me into the office after the week-long interview when we're back at the base. And they say, sorry, we're not going to give you a job. And I was devastated. I drove back to Salt Lake City with this guy who was about my age that I met at the training and figured that my dreams were over for now. But I end up getting a call the next day and they say, hey, we don't have any jobs in the field, but we may have an as needed position available at the residential site for the young adult program, men ages 18 to 30, or you might be able to get a job at the youth program ages 13 to 18. And I'm stoked. I'm like, tell me when to be there. I'll get all my shit in my car and I'll drive from Arkansas to Utah and make it work. So we move into the hiring process. It turns out that because I had had a violent conviction, although it was only a misdemeanor, I could not work for the youth program, which I was okay with, but it just limited my options. And that I also could not drive the company vehicles because I had a DUI conviction and I would need to wait and do some things to clear that up. So again, a possible setback. They basically told me, yeah, just show up. You'll fill in as needed, no promises. And so that's what I did. I flew home, packed all my shit in my little red sports car, a 91 Mitsubishi 3000 GT, for any of you that love old cars. And I drove my ass to Utah. My new friend that I had met at the training let me rent his kitchen space for $200 a month. And I slept on a crash pad for rock climbing, which is a sleeping bag. And that was all I needed, just a place to lay my head while I wasn't at work. And then I commuted down 3 hours just to hang out in this little town and wait for shifts to open up. I paid another guy down there, I think $100 a month just to sleep on his couch. And sure enough, one shift led to another shift. I think someone went on vacation, so I picked up more shifts. And almost immediately, I began working full time at the residential center for this wilderness program, and I was living the dream. This is everything I'd ever wanted. I was around other sober people my age that worked at the program. I was helping people. My job was so fun. Every day we were hiking and playing basketball and canyoneering, and they were letting me lead groups. Of course, I got some training from the therapist, but I was allowed to start leading these basic groups at night, eating free food. And this was really where the next chapter in my life started. I found my place. I found my home. I was really doing everything I had ever wanted to do. And all the shit that I had put up with in the last 2.5 years was worth it. So I worked for that program for a year and a half until it closed. I moved to Taos, New Mexico to work for another program. I didn't like that, so I moved back up north to Salt Lake City to work for a residential program. The old program that I started at opened up a new privately owned program, so I went to work there. And then after a pretty bad breakup with a live-in girlfriend, I applied to work for a wilderness therapy program on the Big Island of Hawaii, and I moved out there. That was super cool. I loved living in Hawaii. After that, a friend hooked me up with a job in Australia. So I got a work visa and moved to Australia. I stayed there for 6 months while planning a trip around the world. Sold my car, all my possessions, literally had a net worth of $0. And this was another one of my big life goals. And I did pretty much all of this alone. Spent a month in New Zealand, a couple months in Southeast Asia, and then another month going through Europe and down into Africa. Eventually got really lonely, ran out of money, and had to fly back to the States with nothing, but I completed the trip. I thought I might try to make a life in Savannah, Georgia. That didn't work out. Explored the idea of working for the family business in Arkansas. They do real estate and residential land development, my parents do. That wasn't my thing. And so I made my way back to Salt Lake City, really just kind of floating around. At this point, I was feeling really good about my mental state and my self-confidence. Not to mention, I had stayed sober throughout that whole experience after I had left treatment. So I wanted to find a partner. And this is where my real relational journey begins, is when I met my wife, Jenny, in 2015. Now, I really thought I had my shit together, and I did for all intents and purposes on my own. But as we began to integrate our lives, I moved in with her. We were planning vacations and trips together, meeting each other's families, talking more deeply about what we wanted and experiences we've had in our life. We'd hit some conflict points. Because I was so good at doing things on my own, that was kind of like my solution to all problems. Well, if we can't figure it out, let's do our own thing. We don't have to break up, but let's just do our own thing. This is getting hard to talk about it. Let's not talk about it. You work on you, I'll work on me, and then we'll come back together afterwards. And to be honest, I had never really experienced ever with anybody the thing that Jenny began to ask for, which was to be able to stay in it together through the whole process, learn and grow, and not just go do my own thing. And this was really hard for me. When I know that I can probably go be by myself and be happy or regulate myself, and if I stay in this with you, talking about it, really staying with it, I'm going to feel anxious and scared and maybe angry and confused. The first option sounded better. And so within 6 months of our relationship, Jenny asked me if I'd be willing to go see a relationship counselor. And I'll give myself kudos that I was down to do that. I didn't resist at all. I had done enough therapy at that point that I knew it could be helpful, and it was. We started meeting with this woman once a month, and we've kept up a similar cadence to this day. Now, there have been longer stretches where we haven't gotten support, like a few months, and there have been times when we've had to do weekly sessions to really focus on a particular topic. But that has been one of the themes in our relationship, is that when we get stuck, we stay with it, for one. We don't avoid, ignore, or put it all on the other person. And if we get stuck and we can't resolve it within 24 to 48 hours, we get support. That's how we make this thing work. If we don't have the resources as a couple to deal with it, we go find more resources. Now, in tandem with getting our own personal and couple support, I dove headfirst into relational trainings by licensed therapists because after meeting Jen, I realized that I wanted to do the thing that she was doing. She had already been a marriage and family therapist for about 10 years prior to us meeting. She's actually 9 years older than me. That's one interesting fact of our relationship. So she definitely had a head start in all this. And it's probably hard for me to summarize the last decade of my life, but I will say that the main highlights have been growing a business with my beautiful, loving wife, where we help couples and individuals. We've even started offering in-person retreats here in St. George because we live in a resort community, so we can rent places for people to stay and just commute down from our house. I've been running an online men's group for the last 5 years, and I'm doing my 5th annual men's retreat here in St. George in September. Both of us have had difficult conversations with our parents in the last 10 years, both individually and together. We've waded through some really difficult times in making the decision about kids, which we've chosen to not have kids. We've gone on some really amazing trips to Iceland and Peru, where I proposed to her, Mexico a couple times, stayed a month in Hawaii, traveled to the desert in the winter to avoid the cold when we lived in Salt Lake City, which now we don't have to do because we're in St. George. And I've seen our relationship grow and blossom in ways that I never thought possible. I feel closer to this woman than I have with anyone in my life ever, times 10. Even though I have more experience with my family members, Jenny really is the person that knows the most about me and who I trust to share all the things. I've been in a personal men's group for the last 10 years. And even though I always find things to complain about because I can be more pessimistic, I'm working on that. My life is really good. I mean, I basically get to have deep conversations with people as my job to help them figure out things about themselves, to help them improve their lives and marriages. I mean, this checks all the boxes for me. I don't really even think about retiring because I imagine I'll keep doing this anyways because I want to. Right now, the things that get me most excited are pickleball. I play almost every day. I play basketball a couple times a week. We have a great community of people here, friends that are always out and about. A lot of young families here. We'll see them at the pool, see them out walking, we'll see them at the park. There's book clubs and cooking clubs. Jenny does yoga at our house once a week. We have a handful of couples that we hang out with pretty regularly in the neighborhood, whom we really enjoy. So that's kind of what my life looks like today. I hope to grow our business and help more people as time goes on. And one of the ways that I've found that I can do this is just by offering some free stuff like this podcast and YouTube channel. And if you want more focused support by me or Jenny or both of us, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help. I think I will end this story there. I'll see you next week. Peace.